0.0000. So that means it's 50%. 50%. You have a limit of 1,000 and you have a balance of 500. That's 50% of that limit. So that's your credit utilization. If you got 3 cards, 4 cards, 5 cards, 20 cards, you're going to add up all of the balances on all of those cards, and then you're going to add up all of the limits on those cards, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to take the balances, whatever that sum is, whatever that number is, you're going to take that and you're going to divide it by the limits. You're going to divide it by the limits. That's going to give you point something, something, something. And whatever it is, you're going to move that decimal points to 2 places to the right, and that's going to give you what your credit utilization is. Now, once you get that, and you see that you have an 80% credit utilization, a 90% credit utilization, whatever it is, 45% credit utilization, I'm going to tell you now, as far as the credit bureaus are concerned, as far as FICO is concerned, your credit utilization is too high. It's too high for them. So they prefer that you not spend over 30%. You not spend over 30% of whatever your credit utilization of your limits are. So again, back to $1,000. If you have $1,000 limit, 30% of that is $300. So if you got a card and it gives you $1,000 limit, then you don't want to spend more than $300 on that card to stay at 30%. Now, 30% is the highest that they would like you at. Nothing wrong if you're at 50%, 60%, 80%. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Just know that it does negatively impact your credit score. So it's going to negatively impact that credit score if you have a higher credit utilization. So if you're at 30% or lower, you're getting more quote unquote points added to your credit score because you are at that threshold. So you need to change your mindset a little bit. You guys out there, you're applying for credit cards. I tell people to get a credit card all the time. You've heard me on the show. If you're listening to the show and you've listened to a few of them, then you know I'm a proponent of this because this particular pillar is very, very important. So you need to change your mindset a little bit, right? So when you get a credit card and they give you a $10,000 limit, then your mind shouldn't say, I got $10,000 to spend. I got $10,000 basically on this plastic that I can spend. No, your mindset should be, I have $3,000 on this credit card to spend, because that's going to keep you at that 30% threshold. Now, you can go over it, of course. Like I said, you can be at 31, 32, 33%, if you will. But if you stay at or under 30%, that's what the credit bureaus like to see. And you get more points for being in that particular space. That's where you get the most points at. Now, if you stay there, that's great. That's absolutely great. If you go over, then you just need to back it down some way, and we'll talk about a few ways that you can do that. So, since your credit utilization in itself, in this formula that makes up your credit score, is 30%, and the credit bureaus like to see you at a 30% credit utilization in itself, that's 30 and 30. I call this credit's 30-30 rule. Yes, 30% is this particular pillar when it comes to calculating your score, and of those credit cards, they want you at 30% or less. This is credit's 30-30 rule. That's what I'm calling it. And if you hear somebody else use that, somebody let me know, because I came up with that phrase. Matter of fact, go get my book, 5 Pillars of Credit. It's in there in detail about credit's 30-30 rule. That's when I unveil that credit 30-30 in the book, 5 Pillars of Credit, on Amazon by myself, Kevin King, the 800 Credit Score Man. And that book is only $2.99. So go ahead and get that ebook and check it out, 5 Pillars of Credit. So back to the credit 30-30 rule. So that's the rule for you. You want to stay at 30% or below. Now, if you're over that, what do we say we want to talk about? We want to talk about the fact that you can manipulate that in your favor, right? How can I get my my credit utilization down? Let's say if I don't have the money. I don't have another $500 a month to try to start paying down this credit card debt. First of all, paying down your credit card debt is a wonderful thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do. That interest is compounding interest. That means every day they're going to be charging you some interest. I don't care if it's 17 cents a day, $1.14 a day. They're going to be charging you interest every day on that balance that you have. And typically, those credit card interest rates are higher than, say, if you have a mortgage or if you have a personal loan. So oftentimes they're higher and they're compound interest. So it makes sense if you had some additional money. And this is a little bit off topic, but if you had some additional money, people contact me all the time and say, "Okay, I got some money. I want to pay off my car. I want to pay off my home. I want to pay off my student loan and whatnot." Okay, that's fine. Good for your pocket potentially. However, if you're contacting me because of your credit score, if you got additional money, you take that money and you put it towards your credit card balances. Getting those bad boys paid down actually saves you money at the end of the day. Because if you get that statement and you look at it and you see whatever your balance is, they tell you now, by law, if you make this minimum payment every month, this is how long it's going to take you to pay this off. It could be 10 years, 12 years, 13 years of you making that. If you added up all those payments, you'll be paying a lot more interest and a lot more money out of your pocket. So it is best to go ahead and try to get rid of some of your credit card debt versus, say, paying off your student loan. And there's more than one reason why that is as well. Your student loan is probably the thing that you've had the longest on your credit report. We talked about length of history. You get that bad boy knocked off, and it's going to hurt your score, right? So you're trying to improve your score. Improving your score, you want to deal with your credit card debt. That's what you want to do when you're doing that. All right, so how can we do this as far as decreasing my credit utilization? So if you have some money to throw at this, talked about that stimulus money. So you got your stimulus money. It's the beginning of the year. Those W-2s are going to be coming out at the end of the month, or early February. By the time you get it in your hands and you file your taxes and you're getting some money back, think about using some of that money, if not all of that money, to pay down credit card debt. Think about doing that. So if you're over the 30% threshold, let's say you're at 50%, and this is just a little trick, a little tip for you to help you even get more points by doing this. So let's say you're at that 50% credit utilization, and now you got this wad of money. You got a wad of money, like, I could pay off the whole thing. I could pay it down to zero, no biggie. Do this, especially if you have the discipline to do so. Do this. Don't pay off the whole thing at one swoop. 1 month, take some of that money and pay it down to the 30%. Pay it down to 28, 29%. Figure it out, whatever it is, and pay it down to 28, 29%. So you're right under that 30% threshold. Wait till the next month. Your credit score is going to increase. You've got this utilization now that is in the range that they like to see. You're going to get a bump in your credit score. Now, you're just under that. Now, you said you could pay off the whole thing, right? You could pay off the entire thing. Here's what you do now. Now, figure out what 10% credit utilization is for you. So if it was $1,000, figure that out. And now 10% is going to be what? $100. So now pay it down to 10%. So you went down from 50 down to right under 30%. You got that bump in your credit score. And when I say bump in your credit score, I'm not talking about you're going to get 4 points. You're not going to get 6 points. You might get 30 points. You might get 35 points. You might get just 20 points, but you're going to get a significant number of points when you get under that threshold. Now what I want you to do is take the next month, after you got your bump, the next month, pay it down to 10%. For some reason, and it's hardly ever talked about, hardly ever written about, for some reason, it appears that you might get yet another bump when you get to 10% or under. All right, so pay it down to 10%. This is a little trick for you guys to try to increase your credit score even a little bit more. Now you're thinking in your head, well, that's cool and all, but if I just paid the whole thing off, why they just wouldn't give me all of those points at one time? Unfortunately, that's not what I see when I'm looking at credit. So if you want to game the system manipulate it to your best interest, that's what you want to do. Pay that bad boy down to 10%, and then you're going to see another little bump. Now, it's not going to be as big as the other one. It's not going when you went down to 30%, for them, that was the holy grail. But you're going to get some additional points when you get down to 10%. Then after that, if you want to go ahead and pay it off, pay it off. You do not need to hold a balance on your credit cards to get credit, quote unquote credit, and help you keep a good credit score. You don't need to do that. So take that trick, and that's what I want you to do if you're at 30%, or if you're more than 30% on your credit utilization. Now, if you're already under 30%, same thing applies to you. If you're sitting at 25%, and you're like, I can pay this whole thing off with my stimulus check. I can pay the whole thing off with my IRS refund. Don't pay the whole thing off. Go down to 10%. Then the next month, after you get your bump, then you go ahead and pay the rest of the thing off, especially if you have the discipline to be able to do that. So I want you to do that. That's one way that you can game the system a little bit, and it's going to increase your credit score. Now, what else could you do to help increase your credit score? Now, of course, you can start just paying it down little by little, pay it down. If you have a lot of credit card debt, you can utilize a couple of different ways, the snowball, or you can utilize the avalanche. You can utilize both of those ways to try to figure out, how am I going to pay this down, and do it a little by little. If you don't have, that wad of cash coming in to throw at this, then you can do that as well. So if you have questions about the snowball or the avalanche, you can absolutely look up the show. I have done shows in detail about how that works. How do you go about doing both of those tactics to pay down your credit card debt? So you can do that. Or, of course, you can contact me and we can have a conversation about it. So 800@creditscoreman.com. Contact me there. 800@creditscoreman.com. Contact me there, and we can talk about the avalanche or the snowball, and a way that you can do that in some kind of detail to help you out with that. An additional way you can do this, of course, you can be. I'm gonna say this one because I usually save it for last, but you can become an authorized user. I talked about it probably last week and probably a week before that. I was talking about authorized user. You can become an authorized user on somebody's credit card that's long standing, but they have a higher limit and a low balance. So hopefully their balance is lower than 30%. So if you are dealing with your credit cards and you have a $500 limit here, a $1,000 limit here, a $5,000 limit here, but somebody else that that asks you has a $20,000 limit on a credit card, but they don't owe anything. They owe $1,000, they owe $2,000, or they don't know anything at all, then all of that access to credit, if you will, because they got up to 20 grand, all that access to credit is helpful for you, and it brings down your credit utilization. That's why if you have the option to get one of those authorized user, and it's somebody with a high limit and barely using the card at all, that helps you out. That helps you out when it comes to this. So you can do that. You can be added as a authorized user to someone with like that. Or if you have good enough credit, you could actually go out and get you another credit card. Go out and get you another credit card. You go and get you a card, especially if you only have one or two. Go get you another card. You get that card. They're going to give you a limit that increases your limit, but you don't have a balance on it. Don't use the balance. Just don't use the balance on it. If you're not a person that's new to credit cards, you don't necessarily need to use it. Now, if you want to throw a tank of gas on there and pay it off, that's cool, just to show that it's activated and whatnot. Go ahead and do that. That's a good thing to do. However, if you don't use it, then you have access to more. That increases what your limits are, which is going to decrease your credit utilization. That's another way you can manipulate this without spending a dime. So if you don't have the money to throw at it, but your credit score is good enough to get you another card, then that's a way for you to decrease your credit utilization, which is going to increase your credit score. So this is why I absolutely love this particular pillar of credit utilization, because there are so many ways and options that you can do this. And you can do a combination of all of these things. You want to pay down some of the debt. You're going to get you a new credit card with limits on it. You become an authorized user. You can do some of all of these things, and you can increase your credit score.